You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another Locked On Wild live here as we continue to navigate through the offseason and had a big Game 6 in the Stanley Cup playoffs last night as the Edmonton Oilers stave off elimination by beating Vancouver quite handily. Final was, I think, 5-1. So that'll set up a big Game 7 coming up tomorrow night to decide who gets to go play the Dallas Stars in the Western Conference Finals. Also, major shout outs to PWHL Minnesota for over the weekend as well. Completing the walk-off series win as they win 3 straight to take control of that series and to advance in the PWHL playoffs. And for Toronto, so sorry. You chose your fate. Toronto chose to play Minnesota in the postseason, and now they get to live with the consequences. Game 1 this afternoon at 4. Okay. Well, it's going to be a full sports day again, as we've got a couple of Game 7s. Minnesota Timberwolves in action here today, trying to win their series against Denver. So perfect day to just pop the TV on, and we got that. There is another Game 7, I think, in the NBA, New York and Indiana. So good day to have multiple TVs at the disposal. For those that are joining these shows for the first time, we like to take questions, just kind of hang out here on a Sunday, early Sunday afternoon, just hanging out, just vibing out. So if you got anything questions wise, feel free to drop it in the comments, and I will be happy to answer it. Otherwise, I think what I'm going to do, and this will actually be probably most of the episode tomorrow, is taking a look at the Athletics fan survey. A ton of responses to those questions and some very interesting things that were found out. Michael Russo and Joe Smith, again, just A+ coverage that we get on a daily and weekly basis. Some interesting things that I am learning for the first time in reading through this. So I think we'll just kind of make our way through that. And like I said, if anybody's got any questions you would like answered, feel free to drop them, and I will be happy to do so here for you. So first talking point of the Athletics fan survey. Oh, Zach's got a question. Let's go to that first. If the Wild don't re-sign Declan Chisholm, what should they do? Well, so for Declan Chisholm, the Wild have his rights as a restricted free agent. So this is going to go one of a couple of different ways. Ideally, the Wild will sign Chisholm to an extension, somewhere, in the range of maybe a 2 or a 3 year kind of a bridge deal, to keep him as part of the D core. So that is number one. If there isn't enough progress made in that department here before the season, before we get closer to the season, what the Wild could do is they could go to arbitration with Chisholm. They could go to arbitration and find a number in which, Chisholm will say, I think I deserve $1.3 million this year. And the Wild will say, well, actually, we think you deserve 1.1. And then an arbiter will make the decision after hearing the case from both sides. Will make the decision as to what Chisholm's salary will be for the year. And at that point, then after the season, he would be an unrestricted free agent. But again, it buys the Wilds the entire season to try to get progress made on a deal. So you're either going to sign him to a long-term deal, maybe kick the can down the road a little bit, and go to arbitration. If for some reason they aren't able to come to any sort of a deal, if talks just break down, or if there is a disagreement as to, what Chisholm's role is with this team, then you could go the trade route. But I think the Wilds were impressed enough with what Chisholm did when here, after being acquired via waiver claim from the Winnipeg Jets, who decided that they wanted Logan Stanley more, I guess. I think they were surprised enough by what Chisholm brought to the table that I think they're going to look to get an extension done. 2 or 3 years, you'd put him on that third pairing, and whether it be him or Brock Faber, I think the team is really comfortable with those guys running the power play. And so that I think that's the route that they'll go on the Chisholm front. And since I think he made $870,000 this year, somewhere in that area. I would imagine that his extension will be somewhere above $1 million, like 1 point. I use the John Merrill extension as a kind of a benchmark for what Chisholm could get, maybe 1.1, 1.2 for 3 years. And I'd be perfectly fine with that. I think he has some room to grow defensively, but I think offensively he just in the short time that he was with the team, he was one of their better offensive defensemen, just almost by default. So I think it's well worth looking to keep him around. He had 3 goals in 29 games with the Wild down the stretch, 8 total points. But again, you look at what the secondary scoring did for the Wild last year, and that dried up pretty consistently. So I think he would be well worth trying to keep around as a supplementary piece for this team over the next few years. So that'd be my guess, is that they'll try to get an extension done, and if not, they'll go from there. Okay. Fan survey. So first question: what was the biggest problem with the this past season's team? 2,560 responses. The number one most received votes for underperforming veterans, 39.2% of the vote was underperforming veterans. Guys like Freddie Gaudreau, guys like Marcus Johansson. That was the top spot. You could throw Matt Zuccarello in there. You could throw Marcus Foligno in there. That was the number one area of concern, problem point with the Wild this past season. Goaltending was next with 27% of the votes. Lack of depth was third at 23.6. Penalty kill, 8.9% was fourth, and then coaching with 0.9% rounded out the 5 most common responses for the Wilds this past season. And I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, we just sat through an entire season watching, Marcus Johansson and or Freddie Gaudreau just not take advantage of opportunities. And it wasn't just them. There were plenty of others that did not meet the standard that needed to be had for this team to be a playoff caliber team. Question number 2. Brock Faber is expected to sign a contract extension as soon as July 1st. What do you expect the contract to look like? This question had 2,557 responses. 50.6% of the responses were a 7 or 8 year deal with $8 to $8.9 million AAV. 34.1% said a 7 or 8 year deal with $9 to $9.499 million AAV. 10.5% said a 3 or a 4 year bridge deal. 4.6% said a 7 or 8 year deal with $9.5 million plus AAV. And 0.2% of the vote said a 1 year deal. See, this is interesting because it's very clearly going to be a max deal. It's very clearly going to be a 7 or 8 year deal. The question just becomes, where do you land on the money? And it wouldn't surprise me if it's around 9. I know the team is going to want to try to lower that a little bit. Faber and his agents are going to say, look at what he did last year. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right to ask for more because of the things that he did for this team throughout the course of the season. Number 1 defensive pairing, number 1 power play, number 1 penalty kill. Played the final 2 months of the season with fractured ribs. Played just under 25 minutes a night. Russo makes the case much better than I am currently trying to. Faber was the Wild's number 1 defenseman at 21, in large part because of Spurgeon missing most of the season with hip and back issues. He recorded 47 points, 150 blocked shots. Led all rookies in ice time, 24 minutes, 58 seconds a game, and established a Wild single-season rookie record with 39 assists. Faber finished the season with 2,047 minutes, 53 seconds of ice time, the most by an NHL rookie since the 2000-2001 season, and is a Calder Trophy finalist. It's a compelling case to be made for Faber to really cash in. And so it's going to be somewhere around, it won't surprise me at all if it's over 9. It won't surprise me. And at this point, it's just what you got to do, because not signing him would be infinitely worse than maybe overpaying slightly to lock him in long term. So that's just the price of doing business. Zach with another good question here. Do we know that Goose will be done with hockey this season? Well, I haven't seen anything official as to Goligoski potentially retiring, but I would imagine with how the season went this past year, going such long stretches without playing and not being effective when he did play, I would imagine that this is going to be the end of the line for Goligoski, because at this point in his career, 38 years old, are you still productive enough to be able to even be a 7th defenseman for a team? Like, if not for the Minnesota Wilds giving him the 2-year extension, would he have latched on with any other teams? Probably not. And the interesting part here is it wouldn't surprise me if, now it depends entirely on kind of what he wants to do, but in just, I think it was Russo or Joe Smith had another article that they did in which they were asking Wild players questions. And one of the questions was, which player on the team currently is the most likely to be a general manager? And everybody said Goligoski. So it may be that he hangs up the skates and hops into the front office somewhere, whether it be here, whether it be one of his previous stops, Dallas, or now Utah. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he trades his skates in for a front office role. I don't see him continuing his NHL career at this point. It's probably not going to be here. And does he still have enough in the tank to justify, taking a roster spot on somebody else's roster, more playoff caliber? I don't think so either. So that's what I think is kind of where he's at, is that this will be it. And we won't see him on the roster, but depending on kind of what he wants to do after that, may see him in the front office. Hoptics getting us ready for Game 7 here. Happy Naz Reid Day to all who celebrate. I can't wait. I can't wait to see what the Timberwolves have in store for today's game against Denver, because that series has been an absolute war, and I just can't wait. So I'm very excited for that tonight. In a Wild versus Wild matchup, Rossi, 3 assists, just defeated Matt Zuccarello with 1 assist at Austria's 4-1 win against Norway at the World Championships. Great ad here, Cave Wave Rider. I'm going to just pull it up right now, because I know Matt Boldy had I think he had a 2-goal performance in his most recent game, which is fantastic. Like, we want to see Wild players continue to do well in these games. So let me just go to the stats for the U.S. team. Matt Boldy now has 5 goals and 7 assists in this tournament in 6 games played. So I like that. I am all on board with the Matt Boldy takeover. He's got 34 shots on goal in 6 games, 10-1, and 2 goals, 4 assists for Boldy today. Good Lord. Yeah, let me pop that up. I guess the demise of the U.S. team was overplayed a little bit. Okay, here it is. 10-1 over Kazakhstan. Well, there you go. Kazakhstan. 58 shots on goal. Jeepers. Yeah, 2 goals, 4 assists, 10 shots on goal, and 13 minutes of ice time. That's absurd. Brady Tkachuk had 3 goals and an assist. Johnny Gaudreau had 5 points. Mercy. Kazakhstan was saying that all during the game, I'm sure. Oh, mercy. Yeah, Amanda, Johansson actually has been, and he scored again. He scored in the Sweden win against Latvia. What are his numbers now for the tournaments? He had Marcus Johansson had a 3-point game in that one. And yes, Aiden Gustafsson. Let me just go to the stats for Team Sweden, because Johansson has 4 goals and 5 assists, 9 points in 5 games for Team Sweden. He is 7th in the tournament in scoring. Matt Boldy's currently number 1. 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points. So he's a 2-point per game guy in the World Championships. Other players on the list of Minnesota Wild's note, Kevin Fiala playing well for Switzerland. Good for him. Marco Rossi has 6 points in 6 games for Austria, 1 goal, 5 assists. Yeah, and on the goaltending side, let me pull up goalie. Let me pull up the goalie stats here. Philip Gustafson has a 1.67 goals against average and a 926 save percentage. He's allowed 5 goals in 4 games. So that is what we like to see. And I talked about this. I talked about this when we kind of previewed the Worlds. In that this would be a great opportunity for guys to kind of get a big boost going into the big part of the offseason, and wanted to see that from Boldy. Wanted to see him kind of be the one stepping up and leading Team USA, and he is. So that's great to see. But all the other players playing well also. I don't think there's a single Wild player that is playing in this tournament that is not having at least some level of success. Like, I want to see, because Joel Eriksson Ek had he had the 2 goals in the first game against, here he is. Eriksson Ek has 3 goals and an assist. He's got 4 points in the 5 games. We'll take that. We'll take that for sure. So yeah, it seems like pretty much every Wild player that is playing in this tournament is having a good time so far, which we love to see. Now, also, former Wild forward Christoph Brandner is an assistant coach for Austria. Elite. Anybody else notice or realize? Well, listen to this. So we talked about the Faber extension. Jake Middleton has 1 year left on his contract with a $2.45 million AAV. Would you extend him this offseason? 2,562 responses. 44.8% said depends on the term. 35.7% said yes. And 19.5% said no. But listen to this sentence. This is the one to key in on. Term will be a big key for Jake Middleton, 28, who plays a hard brand of hockey and played through some significant injuries this past season, especially a knee injury that was cleaned up after the season. Did anyone at any point know that? I think we all assume that players are banged up from time to time. I didn't hear anything about a surgery, anything about any sort of a cleanup for Middleton. That was the quietest, like, let's get things taken care of to start the offseason, I think, of anybody. That would explain some of the production drop for Middleton during the course of the season, if he was playing through significant injuries. But like, this is the part that I always get frustrated by. Like, if it's hampering you that much, you should get it taken care of during the season. If it's hampering you that much that it's impacting your play quite negatively, you should get it taken care of, because at some point you're kind of, I don't know, hurting the team a tad. So that was eye-opening for me. With Spurgeon hopefully healthy next season, the plan is to reunite him with Middleton, partner that he had impressive chemistry with in the past. Heading into the last year of his contract, we very much expect that they'll attempt to sign Middleton to an extension after July 1st. Yeah, it was a career year for Middleton offensively this season. He had, I think, what was it? Let me just pull it up here. 7 goals, 18 assists, which were both career highs by a wide margin. His previous career high for goals was 3, which he did twice. And 18 assists was also his career high, previously 12 with the Wild. So all career highs. He played in 80 games, all things considered, for the Wild this season. I would very much be in favor of an extension for Midzi, because he brings a he brings, I think, a kind of a good personality to the team. And I think you need some of those guys on the roster. Win now philosophy tends to make players stay in the lineup even though they should get injuries taken care of. 100% this. 100% this is like you just grin and bear it to try to get the team into the playoffs, of which they did not do. Can the Wild trade? I'm guessing Goudreau here. They can. The question becomes, does anybody want to take on that contract? $2.1 million for the next 4 seasons. He also has trade protection. He has a modified no trade. So he's got a 15 team no trade list. So you could trade him outside of those 15 teams, but the numbers just were down all across the board. 5 goals in 67 games, 10 assists in 67 games, 15 total points. He's going to have to really, I think, have a bump up in his production for teams to want to take that on. So at this point, I think Bill Guerin is going to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him one more season to see if he is able to get himself back on track. If not, then I think there will be a look to probably trade him at that point. What do the Wild do with Shaw and Lettieri and Lucchini? So Jake Lucchini is an unrestricted free agent. I'm guessing he goes somewhere, because at this point you're probably looking to sign him to a 2-way contract. He's 29 years old. He has bounced around quite a bit. My guess is that he goes elsewhere and signs a deal there. For Mason Shaw, at least what Michael Russo was reporting most recently with Shaw is that he is looking for, if he is amenable to a 2-way contract, the Wild will likely sign him to one to be part of the mix. But if he wants a confirmed 1-way contract, he's not going to get it here. So at that point, then he would move on to greener pastures or whoever is willing to give him a 1-way contract. Now, if nobody is, maybe they circle back and see if they can get something ironed out. But I would imagine those two probably leave. Vinny Lettieri is signed to a 2-way contract for this upcoming season. He's going to be a depth piece. He will probably not start the season with the NHL club unless there's an injury suffered in preseason. So he will be one of the call-ups if anybody gets hurt. But I don't think there's a scenario in which Lettieri starts the season with the team because you want to be giving those roster spots to guys like Murat Huznadinov, Liam Ugrin. You've got as of right now, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You got 14 forwards. You have the potential, if Riley Height impresses, that you would want to have a spot for him. And so I'm all for some of those 50-50 roster spots just going the way of guys that are impressing as opposed to guys that kind of just are. Do you think Height or even Kupalainen will make the team this season? I hope so. I would love a scenario in which a Riley Height makes the team out of camp, impresses, because I think the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, his numbers in the WHL over the last couple of seasons are just insane. Last year, 25 goals, 72 assists, 97 points in 68 games. This past season, 37 goals, 80 assists, 117 points in 66 games. Absurd. That plays, and you never have enough skill on a team. And so I am very much, I would say of the two, Height probably has more of a chance to make the team at this point. But honestly, I'll be over the moon if both of them do. It's not impossible for Kumpalainen, but the fact that he's 18, that's a higher road for him at this point. And honestly, the Wild probably don't want that. So of the two, I'll say Riley Heidt has the better chance to make it. Who do you want the Wild to sign to round out the top six? Do you like David Perron, like Russo's been saying? I think I'd rather pass him, honestly. Yeah, I'm a huge no thank you to David Perron. I mean, he just, I don't know if he brings you anything that really stands out over what you already have. Let's play this game. Let's go into and say, okay, you have to sign somebody to fill out the top six. And so here are some of the names that are currently free agents. You've got the likes of, Jake Gensel, who has been mentioned here quite a bit. Denny has been on the Jake Gensel train from the beginning. That would be between David Perron and Jake Gensel. I'd much rather go the Gensel route, but there's going to be a lot of money involved there, and that likely is going to price the Wild out. Honestly, Tyler Bertuzzi has been discussed a bunch. I wouldn't hate that. Russo has also mentioned Anthony Mantha. I just the moment that Russo said David Perron, I just eye rolled. And not that, like, there's obviously steam there. Russo isn't going to just mention something that is not going to happen. But again, it just doesn't do a lot for me. Like, he just at this point at 36, you're starting to maybe see signs of going down the wagon. And 76 games, he had 17 goals. And I think a lot of that was on the power play. And I think a lot of that came late in the season. So what are you getting with the first half of the year? I am very much off the Perron wagon. That logjam must be why First Off left. Doesn't want to play in America. Yeah, I think this is a large part of it. This is the same thing with Jack McBain. Some of those other guys who just see what the Wild currently have, and they just don't see a viable path forward other than to go to Iowa and kind of marinate. And some guys just don't want to do that. So it's unfortunate that this now has happened a couple of times, but it's very clear that First Off thinks that his game is NHL ready, like right now, and that he just doesn't see a spot on this Minnesota Wild roster. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. How about nobody? Wait out these contracts. And honestly, like, this is probably my preferred route to go, is to just allow some of these guys to potentially impress and earn a spot. There's no shame in having a guy like, let's say Liam Ugrin starts off the season playing really, really well and elevates himself to a second line role. There's no shame in having some of those guys impress enough to take jobs. Bill Guerin and John Hines both talked about this in the end of the year presser, is that they want the veterans to be scared that the young players are going to take their jobs. But saying it is one thing, acting on it is entirely another. So that would be my preference, would be to just kind of flesh out what you have and kind of see where we go. We need to play with what we got and decide what we need in a year. I've been saying this for a long time. I could not agree more. Is you have to properly assess what you have. And then you can, through free agency and otherwise, you can go out and get whatever you need to supplement it. But by just continuing to fill pieces, like, then you just push these prospects further and further down the hierarchy, and then they get impatient. Is Daniel Sprong a free agent? Let's see here. Of course, Cap Friendly organizes these by cap hit. Well, let's just go to Detroit. Yeah, no more moves. We got enough. Sprong. Yes, Daniel Sprong is a unrestricted free agent. And what did he do this past season? 18 goals, 25 assists. That's not bad. He had 21 goals last year with Seattle. What was his cap hits? $2 million. That might not be a bad 1-year flyer. Also, the fact that he's 27. See, his numbers are similar to Perron, but the thing that separates the two is that Sprong is 27 and Perron is 36. So I wouldn't be opposed to that, and maybe I'll look into that. This week. So yeah. Much like you mentioned in the top 10 Wild free agents signings episode, shouldn't be looking at free agents right now. The Iowa Wild this last year might have been brutal, but there's still a lot there. The evaluation portion, again, like, let's just take a look at what we've got and assess kind of what we need going forward, as opposed to just continuing to try to puzzle box things. That would be my preference. But I guess I'm not the one making the call, so we'll see what happens. Rossi trade talk should stop. If he continues to improve, we will regret moving him. If he doesn't grow or takes a step back, then move him at the deadline. Yeah, this is 100% right. And this, honestly, this Rossi piece is going to be really interesting to kind of give us a clear idea as to, like, what the immediate path forward is. If, like, this is a key roster move for Bill Guerin. If he trades Rossi, brings in a veteran, then he has, like, fully bought into this team is a couple of pieces away, and we just need to continue to be playoff caliber. If he keeps Rossi, it signals to me that he's starting to think, like, okay, let's keep the future in mind a little bit here. It's entirely possible that they are just doing this to kind of gauge what they get, to maybe have dialogue with teams that leads to, like, other players. Like, just because they've got Rossi out there doesn't mean that if a GM calls that there aren't other things discussed on the roster. I just think trading Rossi would be a large mistake that has the potential to really backfire for this team. And I hope that we get through the offseason and that we're not having to talk about it anymore. The real question is, will Kaprizov stay? Short answer, absolutely not. No, but it has to be a worry. But that's where the young players come in. Like, he has been so vested in seeing guys like Murat Huznadinov, like Liam Ugrin, like Danila Yurov is another big one that Kaprizov has been personally vested in seeing how he's doing. That's got to be the hope, is that those guys are going to be impressive enough to where Kaprizov is going to say, okay, I can work with this. I can work with this going forward. And other shows have talked about this too. Judd has talked about this quite a bit on Judd's Hockey Show. He doesn't get the sense that Kaprizov is a big city guy. That, yes, he does like to go to those places, and, you know, players have enough money to be able to, hey, I want to go eat at this restaurant, so let's take a jet there, go eat there. Like, just because players do that doesn't necessarily mean that that they want to do that, you know, long term, because if he were to follow Marian Gaborik to New York media is doesn't even hold a candle to here. It's infinitely more stressful. Like, just some guys just don't like that constant bustle, you know, of busy, all those things. Some guys just aren't wired that way. The key thing to keep Kaprizov around is you got to show him that the roster is going to be good enough around him to be able to legitimately compete for a Stanley Cup. That's the big one. And this is a great point too. I want to know where all this started coming about in the first place. It just seems like Kaprizov might leave. Everybody panicked, just came out of nowhere. This is just basing this situation off of every other time that this has happened in Minnesota sports. You know, this is not the same as the Marian Gaborik situation where he basically had one foot out the door. It's, people just assume that because guys get really, really good, that they're not going to want to stay here. But I hope people are keeping an eye on what Anthony Edwards is doing with the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, because Edwards has been very outspoken about the fact that he wants to build a winner here. Like, there's no reason that Kaprizov can't be part of a winner here. I think people just assume when players get really, really good, and Kaprizov is really, really good, people just assume that they're not going to want to stick it out here, because if the last guy left, then this guy is definitely going to leave too. So it is just kind of ingrained in people's heads that you know, it's that other shoe dropping constantly with Minnesota sports. Kaprizov lived closer to Mongolia than Moscow. Seems pretty low key compared to other famous Russian players. Yeah, that's a good point. Juice is bringing up some really good points here. Question is he enough to build a team around, or should we be looking for a better system? He obviously, this is... So what I look at from all of these other teams in the playoffs that are having success, like Edmonton is a great example. There's no question that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are good. There's no question that they can carry a team, but in the postseason, you have to have players that step up to help. And it's not something that players can be like, it's not something you can be instructed to do. You just have to do it. That has been really a problem area for the Wild over the last few years, is that the supporting cast just kind of disappears. And it happened against St. Louis. It happened against it didn't happen against Dallas because Kaprizov was injured and was not able to contribute as he typically does. But in St. Louis, Kaprizov had, I think, 7 goals in the 6 games, and the rest of the team had like 6 combined. It's great to have a number one go-to guy, but one player does not win a series. And so I think Kaprizov is a perfect centerpiece for this team, but you have to have other players that are capable and consistent enough to be able to help out. And this is the big thing for Matt Boldy, is the consistency is the next big thing that he needs to kind of add to his arsenal, is just being more of a consistent contributor. Even on nights when he's not scoring, like when the points aren't flowing, find other ways to impact the game. Be physical out there. Do other things to be able to make an impact if you're not scoring. Let's look back at the 2023 spring. If Ek is able to play against Dallas, does that change the series? It's a good question. I mean, it has to, right? It has to make a difference. The question I have is just, does Dallas still find ways to win in the same ways that they did by just exposing the special teams? Now, with Eriksson Ek, obviously he helps the penalty kill and the power play too, but that series honestly was so weird to me, because you have a 2-1 lead. You have just run the Stars out of the building, and you're up 2-1. And then after that, it just completely flipped. It's like the team thought the series was over at 2-1. And guess what? They did the same thing against St. Louis. That, I think, is the bigger problem, is just the lack of being able to close out a series. And whose fault is that? Like, that's something that the entire team's got to wear. That's what needs to that's one area that needs to change. Right now, the Wild are kind of in that area where they have good pieces. There's so much pressure on Kaprizov. Yeah, secondary scoring. Like, need to you just need to have 2 or 3 guys. The Athletic put out a piece in which they looked at the things that contenders have. You got to have 2 legitimate scoring lines. Number 1, you got to have 2 bona fide legitimate scoring lines. You got to have superstars up top. You have to have 2 lines that can take over a game. If one gets shut down, the other steps up and takes its place. And this is kind of where the Wild are at right now, is, is Kirill, Eriksson Ek, Boldy, are those players on playoff teams? Yes, absolutely. They just need more of those guys to fill the middle 6, especially the second line, for them to be like a bona fide, legitimate playoff contender. We really need to stop funding Fleury's retirement. Why is he still playing for us over the other options? Well, that is a large part of Bill Guerin continuing to be comfortable with bringing him back into the equation. Guerin obviously values the leadership that Fleury brings and the personality that he brings to the table. These pieces are all things that that Guerin thinks very highly of, and so that's the reason that they continue to bring him back and have him on the roster. I'm assuming that he will want to be traded in 2 years. He's looking at starting a franchise around him in 2 years, or he can be a piece of a puzzle on another team already cup bound. Yes, but at the same time, then he goes from being the guy to being just part of the mix. Like, who even would? The Rangers can't afford him, first and foremost. So he wouldn't be able to go there. The Islanders are about to take a step back and kind of go in a different direction. So he's not going to go there. I don't know. Like, maybe the Kings. Who do you think, Juice? Where do you think he would go? What team do you think Kirill would go to other than here? That's probably the answer, is any team other than here. It's a big question. It has to be. Like, it's got to be something that is in the minds of everybody that works with his team. Wishes Minnesota had mountains like Colorado. Wants to be around the mountains all the time. Well, the Avs can't afford him either. So maybe Utah? I mean, the other thing too is like finding room for an $11 or a $12 million player. It doesn't just happen. Like, you would have to, if you were a team like the New York Rangers, you have to start making room for him now. This offseason. You have to start making room for that type of a deal. I saw your question the first time. I was just going on a tangent, Hoptics. Do you think Kaprizov waives his no movement clause if he doesn't want to resign? If so, what's the return? I mean, do we want to push him out of town? Are we just looking for reasons to push Kaprizov out of town? I mean, if you're going to trade him, you'd probably have to get a first. It'd have to be a couple of firsts, a top-level prospect, and an NHL-ready player at minimum. And I don't think that's even remotely close to enough. I'm just trying to see here. What was... Show me the trades. Let's see here. Trying to find a comparable trade. I mean, it would have to be the it'd have to be the Jack Eichel trade, or maybe I would say I'll say Matthew Tkachuk. That would, I think, be the best comparable to this current situation, because Tkachuk told the Flames that he wasn't going to re-up. And so the Flames send Tkachuk to Florida. They get Jonathan Huberdeau back, which at the time he was like a 115-point player. Mackenzie Weegar, Cole Schwindt, and a conditional first-round pick in 2025. Huberdeau has just mothballed. And so that would be one, is like a legitimate, probably younger star, plus then prospects and picks. The Eichel trade, Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs, and a first and another pick. So that's probably what you're looking at this point for a trade. Again, if you would rather just go down the route of like, let's not beat around the bush, like let's just trade him, let's get it over with. If you'd rather just rip the Band-Aid off, that's probably what you're looking at in return. And is that enough? Is that enough for you to rather have that than to just do some of the dirty work to try to make the team better around him? If Edmonton wanted to swap McDavid for Kaprizov straight up, there is no scenario in which that's happening, because as good as Kirill is, Connor McDavid is the best player on the planet. And Edmonton is not going to entertain anything along those lines unless they absolutely have to. And I don't know who has anything to even offer that would be enough to get him. So I think Edmonton, I don't think there's a scenario in which Edmonton does that. And also, what is he making? 12 and a half? What even is the McDavid contract? He's obviously not getting paid enough. 12 and a half. He's a free agent 2026, 2027. Hyman, I'd wager Kaprizov gets offered the bag and stays in Minnesota. Honestly, I'm really not worried about getting to where you need to get to keep him. My biggest worry with Kaprizov is during the contract, him saying, "I'm getting sick of this." That's my biggest worry. Is that at some point during the deal, he just decides that he's not willing to stick it out. I really don't have a ton of worry about him signing long term, because Bill Guerin's going to give him 10 and a half, 11, because he means that much to this franchise. Like, he has already in 4 years become the best player to ever put on the skates for this team. So like, Bill Guerin is not an idiot. He knows the stakes are high, and that if he allows Kaprizov to leave, that he's probably going to. All right, I think with that, I'm going to call it an afternoon. So here's what we have coming up for the rest of the week. Alex and I are going to go through the athletic survey, react to all the responses, and we'll kind of discuss that. Going to do some more draft profiles because apparently Cole Iserman is like a goal per game player. Through multiple hundred games. So I got to dive into that a little more. We'll be doing player grades for Joel Eriksson Ek this week as well. So continuing the content train, even though the offseason is here, because it's Locked On Wilds, and we are your team every day. So make sure to subscribe if you have not already. If you would like, make sure to join our Discord server where we discuss pretty much everything you can think of all throughout the week and all throughout the offseason too. Go Wolves. Thanks everybody for tuning in here today. And we will see you for tomorrow's episode of Locked On Wild. Appreciate everybody's support as always. Appreciate the conversation. And we will see you for tomorrow's episode. We are, again, your team every day.